and a little early, but why not? No time like the present, am I right? Up top, everybody. Do, 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 do. I can see that we got one other person besides myself, or it's just me. Oh well, screw it. Who cares? A lot of things to cover. Not much time to go through because I am competing with Monday Night Football because I am dumb. Um, anyways, so the whole premise of this is I revisited a topic from quite a respectable gentleman named Peter Lynch. Uh, and one of the topics that you may see some videos or clips or snippets here and there where he talks about, hey, why don't people, retail investors, general people, uh, if they choose to put their money into individual companies or stocks, why don't they do so in places where they actually work or frequent and have a good understanding of? And I wanted to see if I could do that in a more modern sense, because oftentimes uh, Peter Lynch isn't the most upfront, or maybe not front is the right word, as public. There we go. As some of the other big names and titans of the financial space. So let me just do a little bit of housekeeping here and unpin a thing. Cool, did it. And yeah. So again, Peter Lynch, the whole concept. Maybe consider investing what you know or what you spend your time with, around, and are aware of. And I wanted to expand upon that. And given that this is a negative 2A1G special, Andrew and my channel, the negative 2A symbolizes that I'm not an accountant, just a student. Um, Contrary to the title. So you can do the math to figure out who the two accountants are in this thing. Anyways, yes, Andrew's worth four. So, given our, or at least my shtick, my gimmick, my meme, the lore, uh, I wanted to, add on a little bit of things for people to consider before they just go YOLOing in and, you know, thinking, oh, this is great, just throw in money, YOLO it, and so on and so forth. And I wanted to add on some like different perspectives to that methodology. And first and foremost, maybe I'm too pessimistic, maybe I'm too draconian, but downside. Always in your mind when it comes to these components that we'll be talking about, consider the downside. Respect the nuances of each specific market or industry or sector or what have you. There's always different nuances and there's always different ways that people think and operate. And that doesn't mean that you should necessarily be judgmental or should be overly harsh or critical. Just, maybe it's not a good fit. Maybe you can spend a fair amount of time at the opera house, but you sure as hell can't sing. Uh, you know, uh, but that doesn't mean that you can't appreciate a thing for what it is or respect a thing for what it is, and keep your life moving. As opposed to, like, I don't know, sitting in some corner like stewing over singers. Uh, and the other component also is respecting perceptions and narratives, to include your own. Like, I'll give you a rough, really, really rough and sloppy timeline of our topic and title, and reconciling it with that Peter Lynch concept of invest where what you know, and maybe you have some sort of edge there. Uh, just things to keep in mind. So, with that said, let's go on to this. We'll consider the good old ref error that I manually input in. No. All right. So, bigger YouTubers like the Plain Bagel has already done a topic like this. In terms of, like, in general, when it comes to any sort of investing that he likes to do with his own money. And for me, I didn't want to give this as a necessarily like as a checklist. To me, I'm still experimenting around. And sometimes I'll go with a company specific in mind, or an industry first, or come in with some sort of macro concept or idea of headwinds and tailwinds and go about it from that approach. And I haven't found too much of a difference. But if you're going to do something as an individual investor and pick individual stocks or companies for a trade or for speculation or as a longer term investment, um, consider your methodology. Maybe you're a person where structure and order does matter, and maybe you can find value in tweaking the order of things. Um, just food for thought. But yeah, in this case, though, we're talking about the VTuber agency companies, as I call them. Maybe that's improper. Maybe that's unfair. I will leave that up to you, and we'll get to that. But there's narrative and sentiment everywhere for all sorts of different components. So a VTuber agency is just a subcomponent of a talent agency, more or less. And the talent agencies have been around for God, how many years, decades? Uh, you know, Viable business model can be done, but there are sentiments and narratives around which if we reference. Um uh, One of the other things that I've recently been digging into was the uranium markets and nuclear power, just because I'm a weird research nerd like that. And the thing that is funny is that if you look at the individual companies, many of them operate either they are taking uranium or they are selling uranium for longer term contract rates, many years out. Uh, the weird thing though is that for whatever reason, based off of like one or two sources that I've been able to enjoy some podcast content off of, it would appear that people have this conception that yeah, the long term rates matter, but spot price, the spot market really matters. And it's a narrative that, however flawed you may think it is, I personally think it's a bit of a flawed heuristic or narrative. It is a sentiment and it is something to respect and consider, i.e., downside. Um, so like, and then you can go into the minutia and the nuance of, well, what is the uranium spot market made of, who dictates the prices, who or who what participants are there, how efficient is a market. Markets can vary from efficiency wildly, from being very strong to being quite weak. What are the incentive structures, etc. These are things that you'd want to figure out. So if we go back to our VTuber agencies, I've noticed that there are some observations, and my rough timeline is I've spent roughly a month just taking a look at two publicly traded companies, trying to see whatever I can scour and scrounge up on the other market participants, as it were, that are out there. And it wasn't like a full month straight of me being like locked in a room doing this one thing. It's off and on. Just even from like trying to wrap my head around a customer perspective of like, hey, what's it like to chill in these live streams or these discords or discord servers, or taking a look at Twitter feeds, etc. Just to get a feel, just get a taste, see if you could wrap your head around it. I reference Professor Aswath Motorin, of NYU Stern fame, and he likes to reference how the early days of Uber and his experiences with it, and his attempts to try and understand that, because he's a older gentleman, fully grown, very fully grown adult. And you would go from a world uh, of companies such as like conventional retail, pre-e-commerce, conventional world of like industrials and financials, et cetera, and you have this entirely different company called Uber, like very early days. uh, so it's important to try and get some sort of like boots on the ground feel. I wouldn't necessarily overweight that, like like nowadays, for example, with a company like Target in 2024, are you really gonna get that much value of like I'm just going to my only local Target and seeing what people buy? Like, eh. Maybe you could increase your sample size and make sure that your observational data is good and controlled very well. But again, I'm just a one person shop here. uh, so that is something to respect and consider. And one of the things I've noticed is from an observational standpoint for some people is a company's health. One of the key performance metrics is how many stars have they made. And there is a bit of a slight narrative with some of these companies out there of well, there aren't all that many stars. When are the next generation or the next release or debut of wave of talent from these companies going to be a shining beacon that we can glom onto. And maybe there's something there, but at the same time, I'll throw my own 2 cents in there. I suspect that maybe in the entertainment industry there can be a sense of not so much of an immediate star being made right now, and that being critical and of utmost importance. What I'll reference is a movie that I happen to like, and that would be The Shawshank Redemption. Uh, my personal bias, really, really like the movie. Yes, it's an old movie. No, I didn't see it when it came out in theaters. But the hilarious thing, though, is while it was profitable, or at least appears on the face to be profitable, of a movie, it came out and competed against the likes of what's it called? If so long as Wikipedia's not screwing me over, competed against the likes of Pulp Fiction and Forrest Gump. Both really, really strong movies, really, really timeless classics. And did this one hold up to where what the others did? Probably not. But at the same time, it's still a phenomenal movie. And in this day and age of entertainment and ways that people can monetize, it's a world now where a Shawshank Redemption can be, or a star can be, managed and developed over time, and perhaps the speed and urgency isn't as critical as it once was. Again, just because I happen to share a YouTube channel that I regularly upload to, or somewhat regularly upload to, doesn't mean that I'm like that's my living. Sure as hell isn't. But just food for thought of maybe I'm in the wrong, or maybe there's just misunderstanding between myself and the narrative. Uh, and with that said, let's go into the market specifics. VTuber agencies. The hell are we talking about? We're talking about an industry that's roughly 10-ish years old, and when we're talking about like companies that like started, not even IPO, just started, that's pretty darn young. You have companies out there like General Electric, ExxonMobil, IBM that trace their lineage back decades. Maybe and there's some publicly traded companies out there that are decades and change, centuries, crossed over the century line. Um, uh, and sorry, just being a bad presenter over here. Believe it or not, yes, I will briefly talk about that because I am, if nothing, a glutton of punishment. For punishment, and I will spread myself very thin. That will be glancely or briefly talked about. But anyways, yeah. So market specifics. It's something that is is fun to talk about because if anyone's taken an economics class, generally speaking, if there's a large amount of suppliers out there, and again, we're talking about yes, a newer-ish market, but we are talking about many people. We're talking about two publicly traded companies that I'm aware of. Plenty of medium, small companies. We're talking about independents. We're talking about partnerships. We're talking about all sorts of people that I I can't even fully get my head around and fully know. Like I do not have the ability to get all the data that I possibly can for these companies. And uh, this is freaking dumb of me, but I'm gonna do it. Uh, Credit to ban VTuber memes on Twitter. But sometimes there's informal ways to get data, and these companies are ones that apparently have gone under. And as we can very much see, and anyone can glance at statistics for your own country or just in general, um, startups are very, very hard. And the infant mortality or and childhood mortality for companies, very, very high. Um, and yes, Face Connect is not publicly traded; it is a private company. But for every one that dies, I don't know how many others that start up. Um, So, with that said, in my really, really sloppy, I'm banging rocks together at my best, hopefully not eating rocks. We can say that there's an abundance of competition out there. I'm a little bit of out of order here, but if you have an abundance of competition, or abundance of suppliers, um, could that imply, based off of rough economics, could that imply a possible race to the bottom? That's something that I just came into and stumbled into this, and the more digging I did, crude digging albeit, the more I wondered, is that the case? And there's ways to see if you are invested or are looking at a company that is in a race to the bottom. Things such as profit margins, be it gross profit, be it operating, be it bottom line net income. Um, your specific ratios of choice can help show you that there's a possibility that there's a sort of race to the bottom. But at the same time, though, we are talking about a subsect of talent agency, and we do have existing companies out there, existing companies such as Universal Music Group. How you invest in this one, I will leave that one up to you if you choose to. Not giving any financial recommendations or advice, but Universal Music Group, good old investor relations, financial reports. You can peruse through them at your own leisure if you'd like, and we can see things that are very, very similar, and very, very uh, very relevant, because their revenues, recorded music, publishing, merchandise, and other. Uh, we'll talk about that when we actually glance at some of these specific or two of these companies. But the revenue mix is one where like the accounting line items are, at least there's some overlap. Ratios are different, but food for thought. You could do something like that now, because it's me and because it's two accountants, one gap. Sony Group. Sony also happens to have its own music arm. Da, 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 da. And you're gonna have to bear with me. And while I do the looking here and finding, I'll say the usual spiel of, please do consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, and passing this on if you wanted to share some good laughs, wanted to share, uh, or get other people into the conversation for comments, because I don't always look at them quickly, but I do try to consider things, and I as much as I'm here presenting, I am of the belief that I like learning, and getting feedback from people is very important to me, to include disagreements, healthy, respectable disagreements. And yeah, these are sales, but I wanted da 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 da. No, I may have gone too far. Um, Basically, I guess I was right here. Yeah. When it comes to the music, Sony Group is a no duh conglomerate. The words. Um, but thankfully, though, even with the conglomerate, you can get yourself some financials and consider, just the music component, and take a look at the segment and how it's performing and operating. Not all companies do this, which can make things more difficult. But if you're able to get some sort of granularity on this, then maybe there's a bit of use in comparative analysis. But as much as I love existing and past data, because if there's any sort of stick or thing that people love to attribute to accountants or accounting leaning people, is you're too backwards looking. Um, I recognize that old models come with risks. And again, going back to the nuance of things, uh, if you're going to compare them to these companies to existing, more traditional and established ones that aren't necessarily in the VTuber space or content creation, modern day content creation ones, then what is there something that are are you in taking an old method or an old company or an older model and applying it to a new one? Are you taking the metaphorical square into the hole, into the circle? Uh, it could be the case where it doesn't fit or it doesn't fit cleanly, and got to consider that. Maybe it doesn't work at all. Food for thought. That being said, I feel like market specifics. Again, if you're going to do a more Peter Lynch approach of considering and investing what you know. Again, narrative sentiment. Just keeping an eye on that. Keeping an eye on market specifics. Could be just general context, nuance. Could be just general factors, headwinds, tailwinds. If there's regulations that crack down on VTubers. Yeah, stuff happens. You can only fight City Hall, but so much in some cases to include companies. Um, but that being said, company specifics. Let's get into this. So, many people are aware of the bigger company, or well, at least people in the space would certainly know the bigger companies being Niji Sanji English. They have their own branch there. Hololive English. They're also, I want to say, both, if not one at least, bare minimum, have also expanded towards Latin America. So again, very very growing industry. Like we're not even talking maybe like global in the sense that you have these larger corporations catering towards every single localized language. Could be the case, but uh, Hololive is well, it falls under Cover Corp, and just even though I don't see him in here, your boy, uh, one of the regular viewers, wanted me to shout her out. So Gargura, definitely mentioned in in this live. So you're welcome. And there are informal signs too. Gargura did the seventh inning stretch. Saying take me out to the ball game for a Dodgers game. Uh, Ludwig, a large content creator, has referenced how he held the record for like some Twitch metric. Kai Cenat surpassed him once he got off Twitch, and then a VTuber named Iron Mouse of smaller or private company V Shoujo uh, took that title for now. Again, I don't know if that's changed or not. Any number of things can happen. I'm not again. I spread myself too thin. too many too many pulses to keep track of, not enough fingers. And if I recall correctly, your thumb has its own pulse, so you can't use that or shouldn't use that for checking a pulse. But anyways, yeah. So Cover Corp. Uh, it's definitely publicly traded. You got a nice little FAQ here. Plenty of things to consider. For those of you that love your modeling, again, no duh. It should be a no duh, but people can and do screw it up. Make sure your fiscal years match, because if we take a look at the competitive stuff here, they're these guys do not have the same fiscal years, so adjustments will need to be made. Um, I screwed that up. I screwed that up. I had that. No, stock overview. What am I doing? Yeah, because your fiscal year. There you go. Not the same. Not the same. Adjustments need to be made. Keep that in mind if you do your modeling. Um, but yeah. Niji Sanji falls under the company Anycolor, and uh, thankfully, they not only have Japanese, but they also have English. In my previous diggings, I want to say either one of the two showed like some sort of investor press material that came up all Japanese for me. I am not a Japanese speaker, nor am I a writer in Japanese. Uh, I botch English all the time, so it's a miracle I can barely communicate in English. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, so just keep that in mind if you want to do your own digging, which I encourage, because just a guy on the internet over here. Um, uh, Interesting thing. If you are outside of Japan, you're probably looking at ADRs. Consider the nuances here of the trading units and and the currency details, as well as what unit you're actually getting, how much and of what share class does it represent. Both of them, the trading units represent 100 shares. So if you're doing things on a per share basis and you're considering a market cap from there, and you look at what stuff is trading for, consider every single little details matter with your model. um, should be a no duh for those that are experienced. But again, people can and do overlook things. Um, so, anyways, that being said, Cover Corp, IR, it's pretty nice. I this is two accounts, one gap. I really like regulatory filings on some sort of regulated uh, database, more or less, like SEC Edgar. But again, these are on the Tokyo Exchange. SEC Edgar does not apply here. It's irrelevant because Tokyo, Japan, not US. So keeping that in mind, there are things to consider. There are things to be a little cautious with if you're just grabbing info from the company itself. Assuming everybody's operating on the level, no worries. But that being said, though, having looked around at different companies, there have been things that have been questionable, where company does a press release or has news leaked to the press of a headline of you're selling this division for such amount of dollars, and then within 24 hours later, um, there's an 8K out, current report out that says, yeah, the headline number is there, but the details and nature of the payout are very different, not the same. These things happen, and it is what it is. But just again, another thing to keep in mind of risks. Uh, but with Cover Corp, I was able to get my grubby hands on the annual securities report, and it's nice. The the difficulty that I have is all these filings are obviously originally done in Japanese, and what I get to see are the translated stuff in English. If a translation gets screwed up, what do you think takes precedence? What do you think is more important? No duh. It should be no duh. The Japanese one, and it's just the nature of life. Um, so you can peruse things over and at your own leisure. One of the things that stuck out to me was page doot doot. Damn it! I love scuff. I apologize, dear viewer, for the scuff. Did I pass it? No, didn't. There it is, page 68. So there are things here. So for those that again really really like modeling, there are things to consider. I believe it was Niji Sanji's quarterlies that say that they use Japanese GAAP, not necessarily Japanese IFRS. Uh, and in which case, as someone who's accounting leaning, I just shrug emoji because for one, I am no IFRS professional. For another, I am I'm just a guy here in the US. I barely am familiar with all the nuances of US GAAP. So Japanese GAAP, I also just shrug emoji. But if you're patient and willing to look over everything and are accounting inclined, or at least accounting familiar, or have access to someone who's accounting familiar, then these things can help out a whole lot as far as like trying to value things. Because in the case of Cover Corp, this can matter because they actually did do capex, and you would think to yourself, oh well, if you're in talent agency, the model would be like, hey, you just have a lot of great networks, great connections, great lawyers. Why would you necessarily need to invest in property, plant, and equipment? We'll get to that later on, but you know, uh, they do it a declining balance method uh, for amortization. It's just a simple straight line. So you would be surprised in how useful filings can be. Interesting thing to note is we do have multi classes of preferreds, things to consider. But just relatively simple. I want to say that their auditor for Cover Corp is Grant Thornton. If I can spell words, if I can search. Yeah. Yep. Yep. So the annual again. Interesting to note is they have a respectable auditor with a big name, and much like how the U.S. companies are, it's only the annuals that have an auditor, an external auditor. That is, your quarterly. These both these companies do quarterlies. Important to note, again, we're talking about an international company. Not all international companies do quarterlies. Some of them just do halves. So stuff to be keeping in mind. But figure I can close that out. Niji Sanji. Hold on. Da, 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 da. Oh yeah. Corporate governance. Corporate governance. I I feel like that should be under fundamental and financial analysis, but it isn't, um, which is weird and confusing to me because uh, people probably should know where I stand on the grumpiness over a company like Alibaba if you are not a Chinese citizen, and even based off of Chinese citizens that I've heard through other sources, they also would be a little grumpy about the government regulatory environment. But for non-Chinese citizens, for sure, you only have access to not just an ADR, but it's a variable interest entity in the Bahamas. So you don't have that. that residual claim on the actual underlying Alibaba company. You have a VIE. So corporate governance, corporate structure, that stuff matters. So thankfully, they give you a nice little flowchart here. But again, it should be under basic due diligence. Shockingly, people don't necessarily do that. Um, so what the heck does that entail? Well, being aware of your important directors or your executives rather, your important directors, um, the structure of that, like of who does what. If you're able to see the history of these people, and as far as like if they've been connected or especially if they've been convicted and found guilty of anything, then maybe that's a red flag. Maybe that's an eyebrow raiser. Uh, my personal bias, it sure as hell is an eyebrow raiser of different parties and who you're operating with. For Niji Sanji, of or rather any color. Whoops. They do much the same. I think there's a little slight variation, a little difference in where they put their people. Yeah, yeah. So for Cover Corp, they just have their people under uh, under what's it called? Under their about. And for the company, they have their separate about. But interesting enough, they just have executive officer. It's up to you to fill in the details based off the information they provide as far as what executive or what department they're in charge of. But good to know. Um, it's very interesting. You have your CFO and you have your CTO. Could that be a bit of a sign? Because like things such as emblems for the government, or things such as the order of who gets pronounced or who gets announced where. Maybe it doesn't matter to some people, but it could be a sign of something. And we'll keep that in mind because you have your CTO for cover, CFO for any color. Just food for thought. Um, so again, I haven't done it again 1 month of like, and again, it's an off and on. Like I have a life. Haven't done like the anywhere near as much due diligence here. But here's one that's really fun and one that I've struggled with. That would be evaluating a management team. Some people would be of the opinion, and I don't know, like I don't have anyone on off the top of my head, but people would say, oh, management team, very, very important. If you don't know your management team, then you're just speculating. Like even if you have done like an amazing work of analyzing financials and keeping track of all the other stuff, uh, you're just speculating. And I could see an argument for that. But at the same time though, like people are limited by time, limited by money, limited by any number of things. Uh, and even if you did have a huge amount of time and money, evaluating a management team is very, very hard because what I've noticed is a lot of narratives, to include some of the what's it called? Um, More or less like consulting groups or different publications will say like, oh, a management team should do XYZ or be of XYZ characteristics. And I don't believe that that's necessarily true. Um, Maybe it's hindsight bias of me to use this reference, but Steve Jobs, now deceased. I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but there's perception out there of the guy was kind of a jerk, or just outright a jerk. I'll leave it to you, the viewer, to fill in whatever word you want. But it cannot be denied that the man had great success with Apple. But if we look into the story some more, we find that in some of these stages of Apple, he definitely was in the way. He definitely screwed things up. He was not completely blameless. And did Steve Jobs change as time went by once he returned to Apple? Maybe, probably. I would hope so. Like I would hope that we as people change and grow over time. But at the same time, though, there are some core aspects of Steve that probably didn't change, and maybe they were better suited for this part of Apple rather than that part of Apple's timeline. So like there's that consideration. Another detail would be management teams make decisions so many times, and we want people to be proactive. We want people to be active. We want people to take action, to say yes to this or that or what have you. But consider different professions out there. And what I'd say is something like a security guard. Uh, if if a bad thing does not happen, um, does this should the security guard necessarily be rewarded for it? Maybe just the mere presence of the security guard was enough to stop a bad thing from happening. Um, or do you want bad things to happen for security to always scramble around? Maybe, maybe not. Again, I'll leave that for you to decide. But like judging metrics and judging results are very, very difficult. In that, how many no's? Uh, what about the no's? What about decisions that management teams don't do that you never hear of? That it's just another friggin' Tuesday or Thursday, and the ship keeps staying afloat. Company still keeps going. Um, things to consider. Uh, I'll leave that for you, the viewer, to decide. I'll take a quick little pause here and take a look at some of the comments. Da, 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 da. Yes, I will definitely get into that. Um, the music component. Because I'm scatterbrained. I am spread way too thin. Hi, Dex. Uh, yes, Hololive definitely does have an Indonesian branch. Um, uh, mm, I'll tell you one thing that I've come to appreciate from my own digging. And one of the things for me that was like pretty influential in my life was the movie The Devil Wears Prada. I was of the opinion for a large chunk of my life of, oh, harumph, harumph, harumph. You know, makeup, fashion, it's all silly, it's all vanity, it's all overinflated price. People like it's needlessly expensive for questionable shit, and like I can at least respect hard work. Um, I'm not saying that we all need to appreciate and love and fawn over like Van Gogh or Shakespeare or even a VTuber or content creator or an artist, but uh, the ones that put in hard work, the ones that regularly commit, the ones that do things in an iterative process over and over and over again, the ones that also try to innovate as well. I can at least respect that. And that is the thing that I think I took away it with. Part of me kind of like half thought of like, oh, let's invest in the fall of Western civilization, just for memes. But no, no, that's silly. That's stupid. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily go that far. And besides, there's also male models out there. Not saying that I swing that way. It's just more of a just an observation. Uh, Hi, Lincoln. Yeah, I don't. Oh yeah, Idol. Idol was the other one. Yeah, and interestingly enough, thank you, Sneed, that you told me that Idol bought out Brave Group. Because that is something that I will ultimately, hopefully, end up talking about some. Um, what key indicators should we look for? Aha, that is something that I will actually talk about, but not necessarily in the fraud sense. Uh, but there are some things that you can legitimately harumph over. And sadly, and this will be outside the purview of this live because the financials that I have aren't necessarily connected to a Japanese regulatory agency. Um, but like for my U.S. bias, SEC filings for like the 10K, uh, any sort of like entry that falls under auditor's opinion for international companies, if there is one for your annual, or if it's a separate thing, try and peruse under there. Because like say for example, U.S. GAAP, the general concept of revenue recognition. You recognize revenue once the obligation has been performed. That's not necessarily the same thing as sales, but people like to equate the two words. Um, and revenue in this case, by that definition, is not the same as you get cash. Like you plug walk up to a store and they'll be like, oh sure, you could buy these pants. You can walk out with the pants. They provided you the pants. They get to recognize that revenue. But is that necessarily a sale if they say, 10% upfront, and we'll work out a payment plan for pants? I don't know why or who would do that, but this is the world we live in. Crazier things have happened. Maybe there are examples out there, then I'm just being dumb. So, if someone fiddles around with how they recognize revenue, hopefully that shows up under critical audit matters. And if there was a policy change, you can actually take a look under footnotes and notes. And then you can try and see over time if, a specific line item has been goosed one way or the other. Another common one is accounts receivable. If accounts receivable seems to blow and bloat, you would want to, hopefully you would see cash flows and other line items, like either match or be relatively on some sort of uh lag, or there'd be something to show for it, either before that lump or of elevation, or roughly a little bit after somewhere. um, and again, it depends on the nature of the business. Some companies don't get paid the most promptly. So as far as like getting the actual cash in hand, or electronically in account. But that those are some of the very, very obvious ones. And then there's things that are a little annoying, and that would be, that probably falls under the category of like earnings management. Uh, Management teams can notice that people expect things for bottom line net income. Well, how can you screw around with bottom line income? Maybe you're a company that does a healthy amount of R&D. Maybe you feel and you suspect that this quarter, we're a little flagging. Maybe there's some levers we can pull on some R&D expenses and push them back, pull them forward, what have you. Give ourselves a little bit of breathing room so we either meet expectations, maybe we exceed a little, et cetera, et cetera. Or maybe you want to front load all your bad news. Again, it depends. Different levels, different scales to these sorts of things. Uh, who you are and what you are more grumpy over, that probably depends. Uh, so again, it. Long story short, it there isn't a hard and fast rule necessarily, but there are general things and accounting line items that are relative signs. And there's also the informal one of corporate governance, looking at executive teams, etc. Major credit to you, Swaggy Pigfig. You made the thumbnail with GPT-4. Yes, Alex. Dex, you Dex, you're always famous. You are definitely high roller Dex. You would probably insist that you're just roller Dex, but um, the devil would probably be where love LVMH. That's funny. Um, I would also consider that idols commonly do advertise in Japan, but and yes, sadly, I have updated to YouTube Premium, so I don't get advertisements. But I have heard that even some of the smaller companies, like a Face Connect or a VShojo, have definitely leaned in towards advertising, and maybe that is a contributor to the growth. For game ads, also, yes, certainly. And hello, intentional wrong. Assuming I got the name correct. So that being said, let me do a little bit of sip of water. Okay. Um, YouTube Premium Wealth confirmed. I wouldn't go that far. It's not that expensive. uh, all right. So tab away. And uh, all right. Risks. Risks. If we referred to the meme of at the very, very beginning, the startups are hard. No duh. And the companies that I reference, not necessarily startups, but they sure as hell are young. They are quite young, because if we consider da, 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 company, did I screw this up? I yeah. Um, Cover established in June of 2020 or 2016. Their IPO wasn't that long ago either. It was less than 5 years. Both these companies, I want to say their IPO was less than 5 years. Company for any color. We're talking Data Foundation, 2017. They IPO'd paradoxically a little sooner. So that comes with risks. What is risk? The financial people, for those of us that are uh, academically inclined when it comes to finances, or just finance under the any sort of business school. Risk is defined as standard deviation. Such a cringe. I get why. Academically, I get why. Because, if you're dealing with data, then standard deviation is very important. But we're real people. We do live in a world outside of spreadsheets and data. The risks freaking everywhere. And one of the fun things, and one of the things that I get to like plug and play into this overly grown long thing, is sometimes strengths are risks and weaknesses. And what do I mean by that? Like, if we go back to our VTuber companies here, the talent agencies, uh, what is the core thing? Like, what is really important with or with these companies? Some might, I think, rightfully so, would be the freaking talent, right? The talent, and not only that though, but the talent and the talent's ability to interact with the fan base, and hopefully your company and your talent and the fan base's willingness to be able to monetize. Like there's some sort of transactions happening. Risks abound, and the thing that is like completely useless from a business sense, but something that like I, as a generalist at my core, absolutely adore, is that there are there are some like weird funny overlaps with this new space. So with VTubers, as Sneed rightfully points out, there's a very, very Japanese, or certainly a broader Asian influence. What the heck does that mean? Well, there's idol culture, and that can be a risk that a company and their talents should be prepared and be capable to handle what with all that entails. Proper opsec, proper ways to deal and interact with fans, because majority of the fan base, yeah, they can be weird or cringe, or meme around or troll a little too much. But like, broadly speaking, I'm willing to at my own risk, assumption that the vast majority are probably decent and respectable people. They just want to, like, tune in, enjoy, their content creator, VTuber talent, whatever you want to say. Play a video game. Maybe they do arts and crafts. Maybe they do music, instruments or vocals or both. They get their enjoyment from that, from like a 1 hour ish to 3 hour ish and change live stream. Or they regularly check on the vods or the recorded lives, wherever that may be. That's a thing to consider, but at the same time, though, there are unhinged and deranged people out there, like, legitimately. So that can be a risk. Another one, and this kind of ties in with narrative and sentiment, would be, what is your what is your company's image or identity? uh Jokingly for people, every company seems to be or wants to project, the Japanese term would be like, what, say so, I guess, like a wholesome image, more or less, for lack of a better term. um but if everybody's the same thing, then is there really any product differentiation? Probably not. And wholesomeness can come in a wide variety, and colors and so on and so forth. So that one, maybe there is legitimacy to it, maybe there isn't. I'm of the belief that, manage properly. Just don't be flagrantly stupid and don't be flagrantly wrong. That is where we tie into what Sneed may or may not have hinted towards, did hint towards. Um, and that would be any color. 2024 financials. So, this one was right here. Click on it. I already had it preset, but this one, it's really, really short. The heck is this? Let me see if I can zoom in and make it less cringe and scuffed. If this was the equivalent of an 8K, this would be a bit of a head scratcher. February 5th, 2024. Any Color made the decision to terminate our affiliation contract with Niji Sanji English Liver or Talent content creator, whatever. Sullen Tatsuki, forgive the Sullen, forgive the horrible pronunciation on my part. I'm just a guy. The impact of this decision on our financial results will be negligible. That is a bit of a head scratcher. And this will tie a little bit into what Alex said. And I'm not saying that this is fraud, but it is weird because we just literally looked at the timelines. We're talking very young companies, not even a full decade old as far as foundation. Not even talking about IPO. Like if we want an IPO date, we're talking infant companies. Like if you equated companies to human years, these are very young companies, um, like objectively and relatively. But we see around here notices of what? Treasury stock repurchase, share buybacks. The heck is this? Now, for those of you that don't know, because I left the title, hopefully a little open to many people. Share buybacks is one of those things that you generally don't do. Because what the hell are share buybacks? Share buybacks are a way to return capital to your shareholders. The heck does that mean, and why does this matter? Your company's management team has decisions to make where to put their money. They could have an existing cash pile or cash from operations and plow it into something. If you're a young company and you're in a growing industry, and I do think that this space is, however niche it is growing, wouldn't you want that money as a shareholder to be put into that? A share repurchase is, yes, tax consequences and the nature of it. It's basically another way to return capital to shareholders that is not a dividend. The company buys its own shares. In theory, less shares and the company buying shares generally means that the stock price should be bolstered or hopefully goes up eventually, generally speaking. But if you're a young growing company, and again, I do think this is the case, then the hell are you doing this? Like buying back shares is a story that you would do as if you're like an older and more established company. Like you would expect a bigger company to do that. You would expect like, or again, if you're a younger company, maybe you can tolerate share buybacks if there's some dilution events because you got to secure your talents. You got to dilute shareholders by issuing options, warrants, or treasury stock or RSUs rather. Um, so that to me, I'm not saying it's sus, but it's a bit of an eyebrow raiser to say the least. Uh, Swaggy Pig Fig. Of course, you're in the annals of 2A1G. Everybody in here, just by virtue of me talking about it. So yeah, definitely Sneed. I agree. I haven't done enough digging to confirm all of this, but it would appear that there's enough smoke that a lot of these companies definitely mishandled their image. And even in the case of any color, and their mishandling of Sullen, that talent's name is, they operate under the name of Doki Bird before and after. Uh, I believe the vernacular or the niche term is graduation, um, which I want to say is like a loan term or concept from like idol culture, or like music talent agencies, what have you, over there. Um, yeah. It's just fun because the this is completely random side note. Um, I love that the wrestler, or at least the word that I'm referencing, kayfabe. I always understood that from a professional wrestling context. Um, Yet kayfabe, for whatever reason, is also showed up here. Because for those that don't know, many of these corporations, for their talent agencies, they own the IP, the intellectual property of the characters. They have the models, they have the rigging. Well, all right. Well, I'm gonna have to backtrack some of that because they support their talents. They come into a contractual agreement with the talent. Talent is now the character. Character operates, but the company owns the intellectual property. The structure of how the company makes their money varies from company to company, but it would appear that there's a probable revenue share when it comes to donations, when it comes to basically either like the viewers more or less tipping, or paid memberships, what have you. It would appear that there's probably that case. um, s- Certainly is the case for distribution and merchandising. How much of a slice of who gets what, again, up for anyone. And one of the pitfalls of any newer company and just any organization period where there's people involved, favoritism is a very dangerous thing. So when we talk about these companies and their value proposition, which we will eventually, um, keep that in the back of the mind, that support and the word support results may vary wildly, and the mileage may vary from company to company, talent to talent, uh, and even within the same company, that is possible. I Again, there's just simply so much that I do not know. Even if you gave me an entire year's worth of time, again, it's such a new and growing industry in space. There's no way I can't know. Ba, 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 ba. That would appear to be the case, Sneed. And based off of other people interacting, that appears to be the case of any color, or seems to place a lot of weighting on Niji Sanji, the Japanese branch, rather than the English branch. Um, do, 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 do. Meanwhile, covers opening a California branch. Yeah, Hollow Live seems to be the one that's doing quite well, and it'll be an interesting one from a financial perspective when we evaluate. Are you in the? Nice one, Dex. I'm not repeating that one, but nice one. Uh, yes. Idols don't graduate; they don't quit. That doesn't necessarily mean anything bad. And again, it can be because it is funny that like when an entertainer stops a certain project or a certain character or what have you, even if they're an independent, that doesn't necessarily mean that all their context and their fan base is completely poof gone. It can mean that a large chunk of it's gone. Anyone with an access to like Social Blade, or you know there are free content creators out there that you can view. um, they take a look at these metrics over time, and over time it shows that not every graduated uh, talent is completely screwed over, nor is the company. So Again, results may vary. It depends. Um, Kind of crazy this industry as big as it is. Yes, Dex, and that is one where I will stop the yammering on the side tangent and yeah. So Niji Sanji, or any color. Uh, I'm I'm sorry, viewers, being lazy. I would normally and in the past copy paste things crudely into Google Sheets, but figured screw it. I'm going in blind anyways as far as like non-regulatory filings or like off of regulatory sites. So let's take a look at the metrics here. I have things annualized here under Finchat.io, just basically an aggregator, a freemium aggregator. I've tried using Ticker. Sadly, for both of these places, um, good luck getting forward multiples, because that is one of the things that I was going to mention. That for if you want to do a Peter Lynch approach, forward multiples would be great. Trouble is forward multiples you would probably want an aggregation to see how expensive optically, crudely optically, or cheap or fair valued things are. What multiple you'd want to assign, I don't know. I leave that up to you. But like, be aware that like things can be priced for absolute perfection. Things can be priced for absolute delusion. Things can be priced cheap, and there are reasons. Maybe the reasons are unfair, and over time, if things are underpriced, and it is shown over time that it was wrong to underprice them, then maybe you can invest. Maybe things are priced relatively expensively, but there are good reasons for that, and maybe you should. Maybe it's okay to put some money in. I leave that entirely up to you. But yeah, any color. My guess is some of these annuals are pro forma. Pro forma accounting here in the U.S. makes me want to cry because I've tried to bang rocks together with Warner Brothers Discovery before that spin-off merger of Warner Brothers Discovery. So, how much weighting you want to put on this and anything before this, I leave that up to you because pro forma is difficult. But food for thought. Gross profit, as we can see, and I converted everything to US dollars and million terms. Look at that. We are gross profit profitable. Yay. We have positive operating income. Hooray. And we even have bottom line net income profitability. Extra yay. Isn't that crazy and isn't that cool? It's strange because like I don't think that there is that much hype or froth in the VTuber market or for from an investing perspective compared to say like electronic vehicles way back when like 2020 of like EV specs like Tesla for all that you can and rightfully should in some cases harumph over it. um like some of the other companies out there that compete or said that they were the next Tesla really, or people said there were, really shouldn't have been, because at least these companies profitable, cover much the same story, gross profit profitable, operating income rather profitable, and net income also profitable. A little bit of lumpiness in here, and you'd be like, hey, what the hell, blah 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 blah, but maybe there's a good reason for that. Balance sheet. Some of these things, like the spirit of, if the spirit of the Peter Lynch statement of like invest in what you know, invest where you may have an edge, invest in where you're familiar. If the spirit of that is also the broad statement of play your game, play your style, I am inclined to agree, but agree to a point. There are some things that should not be fudged around with. Now, granted, there are nuances and details that matter. For example, balance sheet health, like the nature of the debt, when things are due, how things are due, matters. But But at the end of the day, though, like you shouldn't YOLO into these companies if they have ugly looking financials, if they were unprofitable, if they had horrible cash flows, if they had ugly looking balance sheets. Maybe you shouldn't invest. Like, so some things, again, player style, sure, but caveat is one of those things that I wanted to add. And one of the ways that you can do that is with the balance sheet. And if we look in here, the cash and cash equivalents, assuming that there's no craziness with currency flows, the cash pile has been growing. Not linearly positive. Funny to note that operating income was down this year for cover, but the cash flows actually decreased year on year right here. So that is funny. That is funny to note and observe. Um, but if we look at this, year on year and each year in a vacuum, this is not bad at all. Like you would have to be unfairly draconian to punish this company and say that this is a trashy balance sheet. I do not think that is the case, like from a liquidity or solvency perspective. And for those that don't know, have Andrew and I have an entire collab video on this topic. I have done different topics on liquidity and solvency, why they matter. So if you like what we're doing here, feel free to check that out. Plug, plug, plug. But anyways, yeah, same thing here. Any color, yeah, they got a little bit of long term debt, but like friggin' minimal. It's like relative to everything else, it's friggin' pathetically small. You would have to be really draconian. Now, I'm not saying that a company with zero debt cannot go bankrupt. Like a single lawsuit could take a company completely out. Uh, so from a risk perspective, sure, be aware of that. But it's not that bad. Not that bad. Um, Funny thing to note is, yeah, retained earnings also growing. Retained earnings is kind of like that cumulative report card of profitability, which definitely does check out. Now, there are things such as other comprehensive income that do hit retained earnings directly, not necessarily on the income sheet or income statement. Income sheet, bleh, words. Everyone point and laugh at the wannabe accountant. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, Cash flows, cash from operations, they've been positive for quite some time. Same thing with cover. But here's the fun one, though, the distinction. And it isn't much, but the capex here. We actually do have capital expenditure. Uh, for any color with Niji Sanji, we take a look. Capex, nowhere near as much. And, if we look at like, just the raw balance sheet crudely, like it's not like they can't afford to do some capex. The hell is going on? Um, yeah, we had a bit of issuance and repurchase, but to me, this isn't that much of an issuance or dilution event, or a couple of dilution events. Like, isn't much. Like you would need to be pretty unfairly draconian and like being overly critical on that. To me, that kind of seems interesting again to go back to Sullen and that issue of why are you buying back your shares. um but yeah, yeah, again, like it seems like these companies are all right. But sure, at the same time, share issuance dilution is a real expense to the shareholder. So if you're buying into a company, be aware that that can be a bit of a point of contention. uh if the company produces strong financial results but they keep diluting you along the way, don't be surprised if your share price doesn't go anywhere, or goes against you. Entirely possible for any number of things. But so that's just a quick little breeze. Estimates, sadly, again, I am a poor person, so I don't really have access to great forward estimates on these guys. you know but we'd want to look at different things for consideration on how things go. And yes, both of these companies are up. I want to say since IPO, but the ugliness there is a bit of ugliness here, and that's one of the things I want to fall back on is the risks. If you are a U.S. viewer, which I imagine a fair amount of you are, or European, there is a currency component to consider, and that could be quite big. There are macro considerations that I hate. I absolutely despise awful internet macro hot takes that plague all of internet. From Twitter to YouTube to Reddit to everywhere. Um, but it does matter, and that can cause discrepancies or oddities um, in in these companies and how they perform. With if you're looking at them as an investment, but is what it is. Um, Market cap here of quite a lot of yen. to quite a lot of yen. It is curious though, because like I was under the impression that Cover Corp was the bigger market cap or the bigger company, quote unquote, from a market cap perspective, and it appears to be not the case. And I suppose this is where like a little bit of comparative and competitive analysis can come into play here, and that would be this company appears to legitimately be changing its business model, and that's one of the things I want to talk about is in any sort of like new or growing industry, how things develop over time really matter. If you were a shareholder of Uber and you were like, oh, all I care about is the Uber US cash flows, that's silly, because if you look at the name Uber Holdings, it's a holding company. It's quite tricky because some people are not hardware wired well for software type companies, but the other one is that like if you're a holding company and Uber is, that means that you got to take a look at their holdings, no duh. um, and in the case of an Uber, not only did they make investments in different types of like logistic companies, and many of them did not go over very well, but they also like bought, like just simply bought and have ownership in different sort of like rideshare companies all across the world. And that means that like if you only focused on your little bubble or your the US isn't a little bubble, but it's only one bubble, it's only one part to the entire whole of Uber. And as a holding company, if enough of their segments internationally or globally aren't doing well, but the US market's doing all right enough, or vice versa, you could be in for a weird ride that you didn't anticipate for. Like again, I'm not saying to necessarily go out and like YOLO into Uber or short Uber, because that's not my business. Even with my own money, it's just more of a like be aware of what you're getting yourself into and how things can go your way and go against you in you know surprising ways. Uh, so yeah. Like, and to wrap up what I was talking about with Cover, is they're changing up the business model and their value prop to their talents. It seems because that capex correlates or ties into their property plant equipment. It definitely has grown. Any color. And again, keep in mind larger market cap. How's their property plant equipment? It's barely grown. So, the finances definitely do tie into some of the headlines. I don't have any of the rough headlines right now, but like there were things and signs of Cover Corp putting money into physical, property for things like say studios, or like better property to support like 3D modeling and 3D events. Um, Now the difficulties is that if Cover were to do this, and if the market were viable international, that means that if you're modeling things out, you should anticipate that that there may be a need for this capex to expand in the future going forward. Maybe if you're a Niji Sanji or any color shareholder, uh, this could be the case where it's like, oh, we're not doing that right now, but keep that in the back of your mind. Maybe the story changes, or maybe the capex is needed and you're falling behind, because that can be the case. Like some of the narratives I've heard with any color or Niji Sanji is very very keen eye for profit, very shrewd, and perhaps maybe to the detriment of talent. And some people would harumph and be like, oh, executives or oh, investors, they're the ones at fault. Not necessarily. It's just more of a trade-off thing. And just be aware that, like, you could see a case where maybe you're falling behind, or in the case of cover, maybe the capex isn't needed. Maybe the capex is a bad idea. uh at the same time, though, like, if doubling back to cover, like, property, plant, and equipment, yeah, this will erode over time, won't get as big, but it's not that big relative to total assets, relative to market cap, relative to whatever metric you want to use. um so food for thought. uh and I want to double back, because when you spread yourself too thin, you do a lot of bouncing around. And yeah, doubling back. I originally found myself wondering, what if this is a race to the bottom industry. You can still have growth, but it may be a race to the bottom. But I don't necessarily think that may be the case, because if we take a look at my final point, and that'd be just modeling. And I'm not even talking about like any sort of discounted cash flow model or anything cool like that, quote unquote cool. Nerds, nerd. Uh, I'm gonna use a really weird one, one that I've referenced before, uh, one that has permeated through academia in recent years for business schools. And academics and academia can, and in some cases should, get kind of hassled and heckled, but that would be a business model canvas. And uh, Fabio of Capital Mindset fame has noted that sometimes investors don't think enough like entrepreneurs as business operators. Um, and I do think that there is merit to that. Uh, and what does the business model do? Well, it can be an exercise in futility, but you yourself, it can be a nice little mental model or perspective of trying to like evaluate a company, not by like profitability or cash flows or whatever. Just evaluate the company, because why the hell do companies exist? They're supposed to provide some sort of good or service to someone out there. They hopefully get paid for it, and they continue to exist that way, or they sit and hold some sort of asset. Generally speaking, the other shell companies, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm talking like actual companies that do actual things. And for all the harumphing you can do about talent agencies or the entertainment industry or whatever, they actually do something. They do have a value proposition. They have a brand, they have an image, they are a way for the talent to have relatively sped up growth as far as like viewership, subscribers, fan base. uh, in some cases the support can be quite extensive. Some talent, in theory, they could get better, they could get different like lessons for art, music, language, expand your viewership base. uh Again, like I said before, if we refer back, support can vary, mileage can vary, the value prop can certainly wildly vary, because there were reports, or people have said that in the case of the talent Sullen, she put a lot of money into her own projects. um, and that is something to consider. That maybe the value proposition isn't what you think it is that the company provides to its own workforce. and which would ultimately convey itself into the customers. Um, so some of these things and some of these boxes can be a little blurred. With customer relations and customer segments. Channels is an important thing in this industry. Generally speaking, broadly speaking, there's two main platforms. We're talking Twitch and YouTube. If things change, then that could be quite dramatic to the companies in question. But also, there's things to respect that there are also Japanese and Korean, Indonesian, Latin social media platforms that are potentially viable. Um, there are a whole different number of things. Key resources, key partnerships. Good luck figuring out who these companies' suppliers are. But if you're able to figure that out, maybe there's something there. Revenue streams, again, consider that what these companies do. The existing model, we referenced Sony Music Group or Sony Group's music division, Universal Music Group, other agencies out there that probably exist under some other wing. Um, we're talking IP rights, we're talking merchandise, we're talking uh, some sort of license fee arrangement with like Spotify or whatever platforms out there. So it's just be aware that yes, that is a good thing to have, but who's on the other side? Who's paying them? Well, if Spotify were really really big and able to push its weight around, don't be surprised that like if you were a Universal Music Group shareholder, you see your top line go down and therefore your bottom line. Just things to be aware of. Cost structure, also very, very important. Now, from an entrepreneur perspective, this ranks relatively low, but as your company matures, I think that this becomes very, very important. And, if you're able to control your costs or work around with your costs and how things are paid for, then maybe there's a fighting edge. And that is something to consider is size and scale can and do matter. Uh, for all the dogpiling that any color or Niji Sanji gets and has gotten, which again, right or wrong, I leave that up to you. I'm not here to make any judgments. What I will say is that it almost should be expected. Younger companies that grow over time have growing pains themselves. When you're a startup, when you're a young company, do you think you necessarily get the top and the best of the best working at every single department and division? Probably not. Um, and even then, even when you're an established company, like there are well documented things like the Peter principle, where like or just general concepts where people fail forward and get promoted to a level of incompetence when maybe they should have stayed a level or two lower. That would have been best for everyone involved, or many people involved. Um, there's things like that to consider, and it's there are challenges that everyone and every company faces along the way, and I think hopefully if anything gets taken away with each and every single subcomponent and subcomponent to the subcomponent, that we just like take a moment to appreciate and respect. And I've been tabbed away from the recording for way too long, so let me uh, go bigified. And I think I talked about everything that I wanted to. So, that being said, is it investable? Should it be as big as it is? Is it overpriced, overhyped, overvalued? I don't know. I do know that I'm not in any sort of rush to short it. Like if I were to short it and express a bearish viewpoint, like it would have to be some sort of like macro like headwind event thing. And I don't see that, like that's just not my style. That's just not my jam. Maybe there's some sort of technical analysis reason to do that. But that again, not really my style, not really my jam. Um Plenty of ways to make and lose money in a market. Um Sneed, I think it's a really interesting space, and I agree. I wouldn't be surprised if we started seeing their talents in video games. That is another one. any color or no, uh, Cover Corp. They actually have mentioned that they have a presence in video gaming. So, your revenue streams expand and increase. Now, are these companies like me in this video spreading themselves too thin? That is a legitimate concern. Like, you only have but so many resources. But again, these companies are profitable. They are sitting on actual cash. They do not have degenerate balance sheets, so they can afford to do this. Um, but yeah, I also agree. I wouldn't be surprised if they saw their talents in like video games or voice acting for normal media, because these people are quite talented. Like even the not uh, Niji Sanji or Hololive, like setting aside the two biggest ones, like V Shoujo and Face Connect, the ones that I've referenced that I'm aware of that are still alive and on the private but probably smaller side, they have incredibly talented talents. That can do any number of things. That are also like, I respect the hard work and hustle. Some of them, in some cases, also wear many hats. If what I've heard is true, some of them even like double up as an art department. Some of them double up as like HR. Some of them double up as finance or accounting, and that can be a little concerning from an investor perspective. Like, should these companies ever go public? But but at the same time, though, like, crazier risks have been taken. Like, there are like I don't want to have a bias against newer companies. Just a healthy respect for the difficulties and nuances and complexities that come with it. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Hell, like Miku as an IP predated a good chunk of this roughly, uh, and I don't think like I'm not aware of like an actual pure like Miku VTuber thing. And I believe I want to say under Sony. I could be wrong. I didn't. I kind of screwed that up. But anyways, power outlet from Dex. I don't know if I'm going to be an OP account. I am just a guy. Uh, just by a sub to all the girls. No, 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 no. I'm not. I wouldn't go that far. Uh, Thank you, Sneed. Hopefully, I do get to put a wrap on that one. Race to the bottom. Disruptors. V Shoujo, and this is the thing where, like, if you only use public and available information, like like an SEC Edgar or a comparable to any other country, like Canada's Cedar Plus. God, that thing is pain to navigate through. Um, but if you use those as a crutch, you wouldn't realize and respect this. V Shoujo, if what people are saying is true, is more lenient to their talents as far as letting talents come in with their own IP, and the talents get to keep their IP. Now that can change in the future. Like, this is just a snapshot in time of a recording, so things can and do change. But that topic, V Shoujo's very existence and potentially Face Connect, I don't know all the details there. There could be signs that the value proposition from these talent agencies changes, and that could be a race to the bottom. If this industry is really, really cool, and if you do your margin analysis and you're like, oh, this is freaking great, I should rush my money in, I would also want to pump the brakes, because the existing companies that I mentioned, Sony Group's Music Arm, Universal Groups, I want to say Warner also, like, there's a music group out there, but it's not under Warner Brothers Discovery. Uh, like, there are existing talent agencies. If a thing has impressive and really cool margins, and really impressive and really cool cash flows, do not be surprised if like someone with existing muscle and firepower tries to elbow their way in. Um, then that can be a bit of a pain. Sneed, you also had an earlier comment too that someone acquired someone else, and that is something that I would want to I would be personally would be cautious of. Sorry, I'm just like failing. This is part of the scuff. This is unintentional scuff here. Uh, but that is that is something to be aware of. That acquisitions can be really really powerful, but they also can be really really detrimental. Um, and it's up to you, the investor, to figure out if that's fair or foul, or the reactions are proper or improper, as far as like any price movement. Do, 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 do. But yeah, fun thing to note though, from an accounting perspective, U.S. GAAP when it comes to goodwill, because goodwill is the accounting line item that shows up on the balance sheet after an acquisition is made. Goodwill only gets impaired here in the U.S. Does not get amortized, at least as of right now, and as I'm aware of. But generally speaking, under IFRS, if these companies, again, and it's irrelevant for now, but if that does change from any color or cover, if they were to acquire and have goodwill on the balance sheet, um, be a little bit aware, be a little bit cautious, but also be a little forgiving, because IFRS generally allow, or at least to my knowledge, allows or mandates, dictates that goodwill gets amortized over time. So you should see a natural decrease. The Western or the U.S. centric bias might be like, "Oh, goodwill's going down. You screwed up." Like to unfairly punish that is wrong, silly. Like nuance matters, even in even in the niches. Um, Sam Veers, did you buy Bridge? By the way, the Japanese Ellicott fans don't care about drama. That is the interesting thing. Is is that and yes, for those that don't know, a black company, which Sneed is talking about, there's I want to say it's mostly Japanese, but probably Asian, where like there are labor rights laws, and a company that's either on the either skirting it or has a bad reputation can be fairly or unfairly called a black company. Um, and the cultural attitudes and perceptions are very, very interesting, because I'm not going to do it, but the drama, or the thing that I referenced of Niji Sanji, or rather any color, and that specific statement on Selin being released. Uh, there have been plenty of memes of Sink the Yacht, or the CEO having an apology video where he bows, and the apology video wasn't so much about the treatment of the talent, but rather about how the company has been slow to respond in some cases. And it's fascinating, because I'm no PR pro, I am no communications expert, but that is a definite case study. And yeah, memes and laughs can be had, but it also there also are possible growing pains if you wanted to be a little bit more forgiving and charitable. Again, up to you. Uh, but either way, it is a sign, and it wasn't a great event. So just things to be aware of. Anyways, just a guy who heated the index. I mean, again, I personally still have a healthy allocation to the index with my retirement passive investing. So I'm fine. Who beat it for now? For now. For those that don't know, if you choose to commit any money towards like stonk picking, whatever methodology you choose, you kind of should expect like periods of under performance, and if there's periods of outperformance, like enjoy it while it lasts, but try and keep a clear and level head about these things, because it's life, it's full of uncertainty, full of risks. By the way, I'm pretty sure Vishoja is more of a collective, and yes, that is the interesting thing, is some of the smaller companies, it seems like it's a modified partnership model, where it's very very collective and collaborative. So What does that exactly mean? I don't know. Maybe because collective organizations have existed for quite some time. Like one that I'm thinking of, REI, the outdoor goods retailer, at least for a good long while, maybe it still is collective ownership where the employees have their own like representation, and it's not necessarily like uh, shareholders or like owned by private equity or a hedge fund or a retirement fund or whatever. Um, so things can change, and again, yeah. So it certainly is fascinating. There, like whenever anything is new, do not be surprised when things change. And if you're investing or committing money with very, very flat or specific and inflexible targets and goals, uh, either you shouldn't have done that to begin with, or maybe you should have been a bit more forgiving. My skincare routine is really, really dog crap. Actually, Swaggity Pig Fig. It's really the lighting and my really bad, poor camera quality. Because I have a halogen light. I want to say that's supposed to like help uh, like reduce seasonal uh, annoyances because I'm up in more northern climes. You just came here to real chat. That's fine. We're pretty much wrapping it up here. Yeah, we need the derail chat. Yeah, because like hell, like the football game that's going on right now, probably really really good. Uh, watch me say that, and it's actually like a curb stomping, and no one cared. Uh, yeah, no, it's very very messy. It is one where I it's not my business and it's not my place to say firmly one way against talent or content creator or company. I leave that all up to you. I just hope everybody can be good to people. Be at least polite and reasonable. Because, like to my knowledge, she's living her life and doing what she does and doing a pretty darn good job at it. Because like don't get me wrong, as much as I appreciate and love the fact that I've had any viewer at all in this entire thing, let alone talk in chat, and I legitimately do. If I had like a fraction of her numbers, I'd be like floored if it happened like the next live stream. I don't know how, like I don't think I'd be like prepared to handle that very well. Because like again, this isn't a job. This is just like a fun little side project that Andrew and I have. So sorry for the inconsistency and the uploads. Am I a spy guy or Vu guy? They both have their places. Uh, Given my retirement funds, I'm neither technically. That being said, if I were like, if my money were pulled from that and like immediately plopped in a tax sufficient way, and I had to pick between the two, I'd probably lean towards Vu. Um, because if I recall correctly, the nuances of SPY is that it's a little bit more for trading rather than for like the spirit of passive investing. Not financial advice, obviously. Like do your own digging. Just me parroting off of like stuff that I've heard and have done a rough digging. Stuff changes. My info could very easily be out of date. Um, uh, oh, there's the interesting one. Sneed kick. I don't know. Uh, yeah, like be aware that channels can and do change. Like Twitch, for all the hassling and heckling that it does get, it still is very important. And yes, for now, a lot of talent don't like Kick, but if there's credibility to things, don't be surprised if like a star is made through the unconventional channels and unconventional methods. He he is quite a character. I am aware that she exists. She has been actually like between her and like some other content creators, they've been very, very pleasant in being helpful. Of like, if if you were to want to do what they or attempt to do what they do, what are the costs? What types of like skills sets would you need? So on and so forth. And that is why I wanted to like not pound the table, but like really try and like balance between growing and rising niche space with profitable publicly traded companies to is there a race to the bottom component? Because if the barrier to entry is not that crazy high, if you know where to look, it is not crazy hard to find a relatively affordable model with decent rigging. And even then, like some of the content creators will scoff at PNG, like just an image YouTuber. Like just imagine if there was like an image of this ugly mug plastered in a corner. uh, but at the same time, like if it works, it works. Like who cares? There are ways to lean into the scuff. Like I kind of am sort of leaning into the cringe thing of a Google sheet here, there, and everywhere. When I probably like I know how to use PowerPoint or Google Slides. Like it's not rocket science, but at the same time, like I know that there's a scuff component where even professionals have slideshows that go a bit scuffed, and and I've avoided it that way and have deliberately gone scuffed with spreadsheets. So but yeah. That's just a long rant to say. Good for her. Hope it's working out for her very well. Um, like we only see and hear what we hear, and assuming that people are operating on good faith. But having if they share sources, there are ways to try and confirm these things, which is hopefully what I provide as well. Is I provide ways for people to think and interact with, and I spread myself way too thin. I'd love to talk about the business model canvas and for leave it up to the viewer to decide is it silly or is there merit, and leave it up to you to figure it out. Oh, good old fantasy. Best of luck. I don't do sports betting. It's not my jam. I've half jokingly said if there were a true risk free rate besides the U.S. short term T bill, very short term T bill, the true risk free rate would be like inversing my sports picks. I should not be a content creator. I no, 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 because then like I would care about the metrics, like super care about the metrics. I would super push to like have things as great as possible. And like, don't get me wrong. Like, if we do get there, if this side project does get anywhere, like sure, I'll commit the capex to better camera, better audio, better et cetera, and try and do things. But like, odds are probably not. Uh, I do okay with where I'm at right now. For now, I manage things in a tight but respectable enough way for now. So that's all it is. I'm just the guy with Shrek T-shirt. Talent management is key. Um, yes, yeah. The for those that don't know, Sakana's Phase CEO, half jokingly called Fishman, half jokingly called the companies, half jokingly called the coffee company, the sad girl company, the hag company. I've traveled around. Like I by no means am an expert in all the lore, but I am aware of some of the things. Yeah, it's incredible though. Like, cause yeah, she's one of those people where, and I'm kind of disappointed that he didn't show up, but maybe that's because he's got work and he does also have a life. Fuhat, divisive person for sure, but like people have their strengths and weaknesses, and it can be a double edged sword. And how you manage that and how you work around with that is funny. T-shirt is S tier. Thank you very much. It's just a shirt as it's a gift from my brother. Debating if I should get a $100 coffee grinder. That is entirely up to you. I am no coffee pro. So that said, thank you all for sticking around. My voice is very, very tired. I'm glad that I was able to salvage something off of my horrible, wacky, weird bit of research, and plug and play where I could. Maybe one day it'll be focused and, better focused, at least, and better structured. But you know, there we go. Uh, so should you invest, put your money in? Don't know. Hopefully, I did a good enough job, like, trying to give a relatively balanced perspective, because excitement should be there. We as people naturally should get hyped, good, excited, good, happy, but balance also is a good, healthy thing, and respecting dangers and risks also very critical. But being fair, or at least trying to be fair. Anyways, thank you all for sticking around so much. I appreciate all of you who are here right now that will be joining in the future. Please do all the things, the usual things, and yeah, why not? Why not? This entire thing was a mess up. So there's a banner usage from StreamYard. Baking memes messed up. Have a good one, y'all. I will be closing out. See you all around.